Shushmita. Hope you are doing well. That's fantastic. Let's begin this session. In the previous lesson, you have learned about various movements formed for specific goals such as the Liberation Movement, Indian National Movement, Assam Movement, etc. Today, we shall look into some more important movements of our time. Today in Social Studies, class 10th, we are going to learn about social movements in our times. Learning outcomes, civil rights and other movements of 1960s. Human rights movements in the USSR. Anti-nuclear and anti-war movements. Keywords. Civil rights. The rights of citizens to political and social freedom and equality. Civil disobedience. The refusal to obey the demands or commands of a government or occupying power without resorting to violence or active measures of opposition. Segregation. The action or state of setting someone or something apart from others. Destabilize. Upset the stability of a region or system, cause unrest or instability in. Anti-war. Opposed to war in general or to the conduct of a specific war. Weaponization. The act of making something suitable for use as a weapon. Concept map. Civil rights and other movements of 1960s. During the first half of the 20th century, the world was dominated by wars, revolution, and national liberation movements. After the Second World War, the mid-1950s saw economic growth and prosperity in most of the countries. But there were also growing tensions due to inequality. People started voicing for their rights. The American Civil Rights Movement was one of such significant movement in the 1960s. It fought for equal treatment of Afro-Americans and against segregation in schools, buses, and public places. It involved non-violent demonstrations, marches, civil disobedience, and boycotts of discriminatory services. Dr. Martin Luther King's boycott of buses in Montgomery led to the ban on segregation in buses in 1956. On August 28, 1963, over 2 lakh people marched to Washington demanding the passing of the civil rights. Act. The Act demanded employment programs, fair housing, voting rights, and an integrated education system. Dr. King addressed the protest through his historic speech, "I Have a Dream." and this inspired non-violent social movements worldwide. The civil rights movement in the USA was influenced by various viewpoints such as Dr. King's belief in peaceful means for equality, Malcolm X's belief that black independence is possible only through armed conflict. The black women participated in the famous Washington March and fought for women's equality. These diverse streams contributed to a powerful movement that shaped modern history. Human rights movements in the USSR. During the Soviet era, Eastern European countries and the USSR faced governments that restricted freedoms like elections, uncensored media, and freedom of expression. Fed up of these controls, people began demanding human rights such as freedom of expression and press in these regions. Some movements sought freedom for USSR control, while others sought to dismantle the socialist system. Alexander Solzhenitsyn and Andrei Sakharov were key leaders in these movements. Under President Gorbachev's leadership, Glasnost reform was initiated to bring greater freedom to the people. Anti-nuclear and anti-war movements. In the 1970s and 1980s, a movement against war and nuclear arms emerged, fueled by the Hiroshima and Nagasaki bombings in 1945. Despite the Cold War between the USA and USSR and America's war with Vietnam, thousands of scientists and intellectuals campaigned for the abolishment of nuclear weapons and an end to the arms race. The Vietnam conflict resulted in the deaths of 8,000 to 30 lakhs Vietnamese military and civilians. The US used chemical weapons and napalm bombs, destroying some of the Vietnamese villages completely. The US action sparked widespread discontent and there was a mass protest against the war, which led to the US ending the war in 1975. This inspired peace movements worldwide. The nuclear arms race intensified after the Vietnam War, with countries competing to stockpile nuclear weapons. The military-industrial complex and governments created a war panic to support increased spending on nuclear arms. People realized that this increased the risks of a disastrous war, leading to protests for peace negotiations. The US and USSR competitors in the arms race began strategic arms limitation talks sought to reduce their nuclear arsenal. However, these talks were unsuccessful. In 1991, the Strategic Arms Reduction Treaty START was signed, removing about 80% of strategic nuclear weapons. The USSR was dissolved and a new Russian state was formed, ending the Cold War. The Chernobyl nuclear accident in the late USSR led to the deaths of many workers and contamination of the European region. It raised global awareness about nuclear power danger and integrating anti-war concern with environmental protection. In part 2, we will learn about social movements in our times. Thank you.